What does she know?
What does Yale know anyway?
Cops.
Why do we trust her? Well, she's a cop. Or she's not a cop, but okay, we should sit a little closer. I'm not giving you any cooties, dude. Relax. You wish I was giving you cooties. All right. Come on. Okay. Hi. We're live in Paloma Media Studios. Welcome to another exciting edition of this still yet to be named podcast. But I'm Nancy Rommelman here with...
Should we call it Nancy's Table?
Nancy's Table or the Nancy Show. I want to see your face more, not just the microphone. Guys. Hi guys.
Hi everyone.
Why are we here tonight, Matt Welch?
Because we're here. That's
right.
Always an opportunistic reason to take advantage of the studio that we bought, but also because since the last time you and I spoke, which was last week sometime.
Yeah. A week ago.
There's kind of some news on the thing that we've for some reason decided to talk about the first two times that we turned on the recording machine, which is stuff inside the New York Times, which I understand that you're writing about a little bit.
I did. I wrote a piece for Newsweek that posted on Saturday night, I think. Yeah, I think Saturday night, Sunday morning. And Matt, I believe you actually scooped me by about a day for Reason.
Well,
writing about the same thing.
Yeah. So the Donald McNeil story, which we talked about before, he was the pandemic reporter and a 45-year veteran of the paper, fired because people got upset at a trip that he took to Peru with high school students in 2019 and had been disciplined because he'd used the N-word in a context that at first, and again, we've talked about this in the first two episodes, that's all we kind of knew. Some of the students had complained, 6 of the 26.
6 or their parents.
Or their parents had complained and said that he was racist and that he was sort of denying white privilege or supremacy or something. But it's pretty thin otherwise, which is definitely an N-word. So on Friday, busy day at the New York Times of last week, quick terse announcement from editor-in-chief Dean Baquet and I think the publisher A.G. Sulzberger that actually there's no excuse for that kind of language in any context, that intent doesn't matter. And they were pretty explicit about this. I don't have the language in front of me, but it was basically that.
Regardless of intent.
Regardless of intent.
Regardless of intent.
Which echoed a letter that 150 journalists inside the Times had sent. And they also said very explicitly, in fact, according to their own human resources trainings or harassment trainings, they've been taught that intent doesn't matter. It's just that's the way that the words affect the victims in their telling. So Dean Baquet went from saying, hey, look, it was a one-off and I think people should have some grace to, in a course of about 4 or 5 days, saying, oh, you're right. Yeah, intent doesn't matter. And so he was forced out. Some semantic.
We will be parting ways, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, but like it was definitely portrayed as our decision. And then on the same day, Andy Mills, who's their podcast whiz, they're resigned. That was less of a forced out situation, but there were some overlaps between the stories in interesting ways. And then since all of that, there's been a bunch of weird ass behavior from. Okay,
but wait, let's go back a second. Let's get there for a second. Yeah. So I don't think that, Matt or I are particularly prescient in saying that when we had our first episode, which was exclusively pretty much devoted to Donald McNeil's situation when it was sort of unfolding. And then last week when we were saying, like, if intent doesn't matter, how do you run a newspaper? I mean, like, it sounds like a little hyperbolic for me to say, like, well, if intent no longer matters at the New York Times, how can I trust anything that you write? But the fact is, that's what most people are saying these days. It's like, you've just told me in print, first from the 150 journalists who wrote to Sulzberger and I guess Baquet saying, you know what, intent doesn't matter, it's how people feel. 2, when they let McNeil go, saying, well, it doesn't matter. So how do you operate a newspaper that way? Like, I'm actually
a newspaper that
at a loss.
In its archives has the N-word, discussed very much in the same way that Donald McNeil used it on the trip, reportedly, which his resignation letter, in which he was completely apologetic, completely, people, I think Rich Lauer in the National Review wrote about this, that he'd sound very struggle session-y, saying, I realize now that it was terrible what I did, and I just ask for my colleagues for forgiveness. I'm sorry for what I've done. I care about this institution. That was one of the things that the 150 letter signers had asked for, that he apologized to them. He did, and it did a lot of good.
I felt really pretty terrible reading that letter. I mean, this is someone who's 67 years old. He's had a 45-year career. He's really been on a high lately. He, had just interviewed Dr. Anthony Fauci, and he's been on the Daily, as he has been since the beginning of the pandemic. And there was discussions that he was going up for a Pulitzer, and in 8 days, his entire life changed. Everything. And I know, you'd say like, well, I would never, apologize for something I hadn't done, or I would try to see it that way, but I wouldn't feel like I was broken. He struck me as someone that had been broken because it happened so fast. Here
is his 8-day process. January 26th, he's going to interview Anthony Fauci on The Daily, which is the most popular news podcast in the country. January 27th, also featured on The Daily, just to give us a breakdown of what is happening during the pandemic. January 28th, story in the Daily Beast, which we now, I think, have confirmation was leaked from within the New York Times.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we had talked about this, but that's the phrase that Nicole Hannah-Jones used, and I think that she probably has more insight into personnel matters at the New York Times than most people do. So clearly someone leaked that he had been involved in a disciplinary case the year before and had been disciplined,
2 years,
as a matter of fact.
Year and a half.
Yeah. So then he has to deal with that. He fires off a one-sentence email to Eric Wemple, the Washington Post media writer there, saying basically don't believe everything that you read.
Right.
So he's got a little bit of a...
He still had his sea legs at that point.
It's sense of defiance, and also hey, maybe that Daily Beast story was kind of ridiculous, or the picture that it painted was ridiculous. Pilloried on Twitter routinely by journalists, including within the institution that he works. There are all hands on deck kind of meetings within the New York Times, letters agonizing. And then he also has his birthday on February 1st. So he turns 67 in the middle of that.
Happy birthday.
And then gets canned. So that was a little 8-day stretch for Donald McNeil. And one of the reasons that's interesting to talk about is the New York Times is still an influential newspaper. And to kind of suddenly declare that, from their point of view, that the intent of language doesn't matter. Now they're kind of backpedaling. And this is the thing I actually want to talk to you about, Nancy. There's a sense from some people, and you've said this, so I want to check your temperature, that some people within the institution, and certainly without the institution, including Eric Wemple, who was initially like, Donald McNeil, I don't know what he did, but Eric Wemple's second piece, which is really interesting, which actually wasn't the only thing that's done follow-up reporting on this at all, about like what actually happened. He interviewed some of the students. You get the sense that people realize, hold on a second, this is getting pretty ridiculous.
I think I've written this, or we talked about it, because of the speed with what happened with McNeil, and because of how we've seen this roll out since last, was it July, when the whole James Bennett, Barry Weiss thing happened. I said to myself, the McNeil one is going to be a bridge too far. People are going to say, wait a second, this kind of doesn't make any sense. Part of that was the Daily Beast reporting, which we questioned at the time. It was like, if you're telling us he did this terrible thing, well, why don't you tell us what it is? And if you don't know what it is, then tell us you don't know what it is. Maybe tell us where you got the story from. Well, okay, I will go back a little bit. Because I have been looking at the Beast reporting, which was Max Tanney, and I can't remember the other guy. Lachlan Cartwright, and then someone else who followed up with Cartwright on the second one or third one about McNeil. All of these stories, when it started with James Bennett and Barry Weiss and Cotton, and then moving on to Caliphate, and then moving on to Rukmini Calamachi, and moving on to Andy Mills. Wow, it's all Max Tanney. So obviously, someone within the Times is feeding him stuff, or they're feeding stuff to the Daily Beast who's giving it to Max Tenney. I don't know. But the campaigns, and it's like the same drumbeat. It's weird. It's like you can hear like the drumbeat in the distance. And yes, and you know it's coming. But the thing about McNeil is it happened so fast. Those drums were there and then they were here. And they were like overrun. And I thought, you know what? Too many people are asking questions. Too many people are saying, wait a second, this does not make sense. And now we're going to get into what I think you want to talk about, which happened in the past couple of days. Someone who crept onto my page and now had some other problems, and how I think we're seeing some of the machinations behind the curtain at the Times.
Well, what is it that I want to talk about? Yeah, I mean, as part of this, what's the name of the kid who works for the Free Beacon?
Aaron.
See, this is why I should have brought my computer.
I can't help you, sir. I'm going to tell you exactly.
It's not Aaron Hernandez.
I'm going to tell you what his name is, because we've been, discussing. Aaron Sabarium.
Yes.
Aaron Sabarium, who works for Free Beacon, who, take it, Matt Welch, you're better at this than I am.
Yeah, and again, I don't have it right in front of my face, but like he contacted Nicole Hannah-Jones and other people to follow up on the story, and in her particular case to ask about the intent and usage, the use and mention distinction, right, of the word. What's this? Sorry.
Thank you, lovely Justin. Readers. Justin, for letting us know. I appreciate it. If my hands were long enough, I'd type an answer.
Yeah. And she responded not by responding, but by posting his query on Twitter along with his telephone number for 71 hours. It laid up there. And of course, his phone rang from people who did not wish him positive vibes there. He didn't make that big of a deal of it. And eventually the Times spokesperson got back to him, because this is in violation of the explicit Times policy. You're not supposed to do stuff like that.
And Twitter policy.
And
ethical policy.
And just like acting like a grown-ass adult.
You're acting like someone who does not have to face consequences. And you're acting like someone who is like, you know what? I got all this. It's been working out. It's all good. And she basically thought that was fine to do. She had that gal that crept onto her page and said something like, wow, he really thought you were going to answer him. He leaved his phone number. And she was like, girl. And then here's the part that drives me. I actually can't believe it. I can't believe it. So, Justin, right, I actually was in touch with Aaron, and I was like, did you get an apology from her? Did you get an apology from the Times? No, nothing. So eventually she does take it down after 71 hours. I don't even know if she claimed it was inadvertent. The Times.
Yes, the Times said, the spokesperson said that she had inadvertently left his phone number up on Twitter. Inadvertently. This is the Times, right? This is
inadvertently. Meanwhile, the guy whose number is up there has been in touch with her. Like, hi, my number's up there. Everybody has screenshotted it. Everybody's like, what the hell is going on? And she leaves it up for 71 hours. And then you want to talk about like, well, some people don't face consequences. Some people say something bad or maybe bad a year and a half ago, and they're canned in 8 days. And other people do this, and the Times comes out and says, well, it was inadvertent. Okay, I'm sorry, this is a lie. This is a lie. And I'm sorry, I don't get all like verklempt here, but I'm a New York City girl. I grew up with the New York Times. I do not want to believe that they have put themselves in a position where they feel like totally fine. Lying to the public.
It's okay just to lie. I mean, I don't think this is a product of an internal Times investigation to make sure that it was an inadvertent posting of a reporter's phone number that she then interacted with other people who were high-fiving her about. Not very inadvertent. So Times, which is a journalistic institution that is supposed to be all the news that's fit to print and the truth and whatnot, is out there lying to cover up an employee who is always, for the most part, in the middle of these personnel tussles within the paper, and who herself has been the subject of pretty great controversy. The 1619 Project, which is a very kind of interesting, from my point of view, attempt to kind of recast American history as beginning not really in 1776, but maybe we should think about it from 1619, because that's when we basically imported the institution of slavery. And there were some very interesting essays in it, but there was also some crap, and she comported herself responding to historians and other people pointing out that one essay in particular was not very good, and not from someone who you describe as an expert historian on that. She comported herself just like with this combination of bravado and defensiveness and contemptuousness, and just like in this case, some tweet deleting. And eventually, after a lot of this kind of chest thumping, they did issue some corrections. Sometimes they rewrote or edited the presentation of it,
or scrubbed it
without mentioning, that they had, which is the usual thing to do in journalism. So all of this does not trend in a positive direction for those who retain the ancient faith in the New York Times being the paper of record. I don't, which doesn't fill me with any kind of gladness. I grew up with the same faith and the same enjoyment of the paper, which I don't have at all anymore.
Less and less. The crossword's still good.
I see it more as a place to go to find what are the guilts and anxieties of kind of upper middle class liberals about their consumption that they don't like. So, everyone's shopping at Amazon, so let's have a 3-part series about how the conditions at Amazon warehouses are terrible. Everyone's getting their nails done, but with the Cambodians and the Vietnamese. So let's do a 3-part series, which was totally garbage, which Reason magazine and Jim Epstein in particular absolutely pulled apart about like the immigration slavery of nail salons. But it's always pointed at the anxieties of people. I see it like that, and that's the function. That's not the function that they claim to have, certainly. But it is genuinely distressing to watch the comportment, yes, of Nicole Hannah-Jones, which is by now we've grown used to, but also the sense of brazenness of it. Like, oh, I'm not going to worry about the consequences of this. Of course, I'll be able to do this. There's been a lot of kind of negative or some snarking on Twitter, like, maybe it was Kat Rosenfield who said this or somebody else, but I wish that Nicole Hannah-Jones and Taylor Lorenz would just put Dean Baquet out of his misery and fire him once and for all. Because that's the other story about the New York Times that happened at the same time that involves Camille Foster in the fifth column, among other people. That Taylor Lorenz, their social media reporter.
Can I cut in just for one second?
Yeah, please do.
I just want to say something, and it's not going to be like in defense of Nicole Hannah-Jones, but it's just something that I am also thinking about her, someone that I do not know. It's not easy to be this controversial or celebrated, or, yes, maybe she's cut out this role for herself. Maybe it's bigger than she ever thought it would be. Maybe there are people that are like really counting on her. Maybe she had an awful childhood, and like the meannesses that we see as meannesses that she shows, maybe she had them, perpetrated to her. I don't know. And I will say, which we didn't mention, she scrubbed her entire Twitter account. She erased the whole thing. It cannot be a very comfortable place for her in the past couple of days. And I actually do not wish that on anybody. But I do think as consumers, and obviously, especially you and I, we care deeply about journalism. We care deeply about the efficacy of journalism. I think it's time for her to do a better job. I think it's time to not have this little narrow window that has been making what's allowable to say at the New York Times narrower and narrower and narrower. And if you don't do it, you're out, buddy. I think it's time to stop that. And maybe she'd be interested in stopping that.
Glenn Greenwald a few days ago had a pretty surprisingly for him, vituperative piece called, I think, Tattletale Journalism.
Yeah,
or at least that's
about Lorenz mostly.
About Taylor Lorenz, but he also talked about the Donald McNeil story there. And I think the phrase, it kind of sticks because Taylor Lorenz, social media reporter, She's been trying to get on Clubhouse, which is this phone calling app that the tech bros do, that you need an invitation to go on to. And they clearly, the people who started it, don't like her for a lot of reasons having to do with Scott Alexander, Slate Star Codex. It's actually not his real name, but the paper was sort of trying to out him or talk about what his real name was as part of a story. And it was kind of the last straw for a lot of people in Silicon Valley, thinking that the Times is now just weaponizing its power against people that it doesn't like for transgressions that it presumes. And she had been complaining and had a history of saying like, oh my God, I'm in Clubhouse now. She'd gotten in before, and I can't believe what I just heard. It's terrible. So she finally gets in again recently, gets into a room in which people are talking about the GameStop, Wall Street bets, the stonks people who happen to call themselves, as part of this group, retards. Which is like in a kind of the masshole lexicon. It's also self-deprecating. It's got layers of whatever in it. So she goes into this place where Mark Andreessen, who's I think the founder or co-founder of Clubhouse, or has some involvement with it, and someone else was talking about this just as a setup. And she, within minutes of getting into the place, oh my God, I can't believe that Mark Andreessen said the R word. It's so terrible. It doesn't really realize the damage that he causes. And then she screenshotted the pictures of everybody who was in the room listening as if they're all culpable. And what was interesting about this was that Mark Andreessen didn't say it. It was somebody else. So she misattributed it to him.
It wasn't like a group moderator. It was like the room moderator or something that said it.
And a woman, not a man. Not that, there's anything wrong with that. But and she also responded to that, not like by apologizing, but by saying, something to the effect of, well, it's just amazing that they use this kind of language and not understanding that the hurt that it causes. And Glenn Greenwald rightly pointed this out. This is, what are you doing? Like, in the similar way of Nicole Allen Jones putting out phone numbers of reporters on, it's not hard to know that that's not what you're supposed to do in journalism. You're not supposed to go to a place, brag about it, like, oh, I finally snuck in. I'm going to do the thing now. And the thing that you do is to tattletale on language that maybe she genuinely finds so horrifyingly offensive that it's impossible to hear it. It really needs to be told to the world. Or maybe you think, aha, I'm going to pin this on this guy's forehead and bring him down. That ain't journalism, dude.
Well, the thing is that someone said something really funny to me last night. They said when Peter Thiel killed Gawker, he didn't just kill Gawker, he killed the New York Times, because all of these Gawker writers went over to the New York Times, right? And what kind of journalism was practiced as Gawker?
Late Gawker.
As
opposed to early Gawker, which I think are two different beasts.
It was like this gotcha thing. And what's happened in the New York Times is that it has been shown in the past couple of years that you will be rewarded if you bring people down. If that's what you know how to do, if that's what we taught our children, you taught your 12-year-old and I taught my daughter when she was 12, that's how you do it, kids, then that's what you know how to do. So maybe this is what Taylor Lorenz thinks journalism is. Now, okay, then it's like, it's the youngs against the olds. And we're like the old people, like, no, that's not how it's done. I know we're a little bit, I don't care, right? It's like, that's not how it's done, kids. Like, you really want to be ethical. You want to tell other people's stories with grace and to really look around. It's like, no, why would I do that? Why would I waste my time doing that when I can just get this fast result? I also saw today, in defense of Taylor Lorenz, all per usual, and again, I'm going to get on my hobby horse, all the women saying, why can't men support women journalists like Taylor Lorenz in this situation? It's like, well, if she did something that was laudable, we would all come out and be like, no, we're totally support you. But she did not.
Why can't men support women journalists like Nancy Rommelman?
What I said was, how about you just no, what did they basically said, why don't you save women? I was like, how about you just save yourself? Save yourself, do really good work, put the work out there. You will get the peeps around you that you want to be with to create more good work. Hi.
Jack Long over there in the live chat says, do you think some of this witch hunt is due to someone being jealous of his success in the newsroom and taking advantage of the current climate? The thought had occurred
Yeah, good. Ding, ding, ding.
Who knows? I mean, we don't know. This is all supposition, although so far in this case, the suppositions have turned out to be pretty true. I think I'll say about this is that a lot of the people in every case with an employee being fired at a place when you're on the outside, and sometimes, many times, even when you're on the inside, you don't really know what happens. There might be all kinds of backstories.
Right.
I've been involved with these things, and people looking the outside and characterizing it, it's just like it doesn't really resemble reality. So I realize that I am trying hard not to add to the sense of making confident statements, of which I know bupkis. However, based on the language of the way that Deepak K was talking about, based on the language eventually of the resignation letter itself, and just also on the original Daily Beast story, which painted a picture of a pattern of behavior without examples. So there was something kind of funny about that. And the first time that we got together and turned on the machine just to see how it worked, that's kind of, we focused on that element of it. Like, shouldn't there be a there in the, shouldn't be there a what in the story? That's one of the W's, right? It's a what. And so the Eric Wemple story, which again is about the only one from the Washington Post that actually re-interviewed the kids.
He did a good job. Wemple did a good job.
The things that they're mad at him about is that he denied the importance or even existence of cultural appropriation using tomatoes as an example.
Right. It's an Italian, or I don't know if it's tomato sauce, something. It's like if it's Italian, then why are you allowed to use it if it wasn't from your culture? He,
in a context of like of either white supremacy or white privilege or just sort of institutional racism, he was presented with, well, you know, isn't it obvious that crime stats show institutional racism because there's disproportionate number of arrests of Black people? And he said, well, what if they committed a disproportionate number of crimes? I happen to not agree with that answer. Is that evidence of racism? And it's like, no, that's an argument that people make. That's you have arguments over data.
But these are teenagers.
And these are teenagers.
They can't have arguments. And I'm sorry, this sounds terrible, but you know, these are teenagers, white teenagers. They're for the most part, they pay $5,500 to go on this trip. Not a bad trip as a teenager. And, you know, they're obviously from a certain culture, I would think from the most part, where they're feeling pretty certain in their opinions that there is, you know, white privilege and there is whatever their progressive beliefs are. And they're not able to argue or even have a conversation probably with McNeil.
Gruff old guy reporter.
And he's an old guy. He's 65 years old. They're 15. Like,
what do we think gruff old guy reporters are like on trips?
And they're tired and they just want to go back and sit and have a cup of coffee, right? I don't know.
But the bullet points of actual examples, none of them came close to anything of significance. And I bring this up because there are a lot of journalists out there who came at the likes of me and Nancy and said, well, come on, it couldn't have just been the N-word. There must have been a pattern of behavior that they're not talking about.
Nope. Nope. Nobody can bring that up. And they're trying now. Of course they're trying because it's become more than a kerfuffle. It's become, you know, a pretty big deal at the Times. Now, if they have the goods, bring them out. You know they're going to bring them out. They're going to come and say, listen, he's been X and Y and Z, but nobody can. The letter from the 150 journalists did say that since this came out, they've heard complaints from people that he's been disrespectful to colleagues. So I presume that if this stays in the news, and that's an if, it might not. Yeah. Like once the head's off the shoulders, then I don't know how much of it needs to be in news, unless it is like you have kind of intimated that some people will see this as a potential turning point of like, come on, what are we doing? I think it is.
What the hell?
No, I actually do think it is. And I think that too many people are addressing this not hysterically. They're not addressing it as an us versus them thing. They're saying, guys, you have to explain something to us. You have to explain the intent doesn't matter, number one. You have to explain the fact that you have come out and lied about something, you know, that was on your employee's Twitter feed. I'd like to answer, just add a little something to, do you think people would try to remove people because they were more successful? I'll just give a little example. So Andy Mills, who was one of the creators of The Daily, and he was one of the producers and also kind of on, I think, Caliphate, he, whoa, oh, hi. That's our little ring light
fail.
Our ring light fail. He, in December, was given a fairly substantial promotion because he's really super good, right? The drumbeat started in January. He resigned last week. His letter is heartbreaking, which is like, you get to the New York Times, it is your absolute dream. You get there, you have the opportunity to do incredible work. And then in 6 weeks, you are drummed out. And it's not, they're going to tell you it's for the quality of the work, but it's okay. Nobody gives you a big giant raise for the work you've been doing in December. And then you don't really do any other work, but in February you're gone. Something is afoot here.
And part of what he mentioned that from his point of view, his resignation had nothing to do with Caliphate, which is a subject of great controversy. It's kind of too complicated to get into, but one of the main characters was revealed to be a fabulist or somewhat of a fabricator or just a con man, whatever. And so that called into question some of the series. They went back and they withdrew it from competition, or they had won a Peabody Award.
And they took it away.
They took it away, a bunch of stuff. So yes, that was a controversy, but basically the controversy was then used as an excuse to exhume past workplace behavior in which he was aggressively flirtatious 7 years ago.
Okay, I would have no career whatsoever. If aggressive flirtation, I'd be gone. I'd never work again. And there was also something like, I dumped a drink on someone's head. Well, I'm gonna admit right now the time I was on a table and I kicked over a glass. It's like, what? You're not allowed to do that when you're in your 20s?
Who did you sexually harass at LA Magazine in the 1990s? Who didn't you sexually harass
excuse me.
Not LA Magazine, sorry.
I never sexually harassed anybody.
Sure. Well, no, it's not LA Magazine.
The LA Weekly?
No, not the Weekly. The Alan Meyer. What the
Buzz. Oh, I was.
Yep. Buzz had some great hot ladies.
Oh, hell yeah!
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Different. All. Anyways, what were we talking about? It's so they exhumed this behavior, including his colleagues at New York Times, and so.
Colleagues in quotes.
Yeah, and to some degree, started talking about these past allegations, and the past allegations had been dealt with, or at least he'd been disciplined for them at WNYC, where he'd worked before, and they came up when he first took the job at New York Times, and that was part of the job interview process. And so there's an element here, and I think Wemple talked about this among other people, in both cases of Donald McNeil and Andy Mills, of double jeopardy. The things that they were being attacked for were things that they had already been disciplined for in the past, but now we have Twitter and we have colleagues and we have other outside publications who are like, questions are being raised. Well,
you've changed the rules of the game. Right? So yes, Andy comes from WNYC. He says, I had some problems there. I was a big flirt. I dumped a drink on some girl's head, and a lot of times like, yeah, okay, whatever. We're going to hire you. You do great work. You get a Peabody. It's all good. Well, the rules of the game have changed since he was hired. The rules of the game now is that is considered, beyond the pale. It's considered off limits. You can't dump a drink on someone's head, especially not a woman's head, because that is now, super aggressive behavior. I was going to say something else. I forgot.
Can I dump a drink on your head? Or
please, that's what we're going to do. As soon as we're going to turn off the camera, that's what we kind of do. Like, the wedding people that smash the cake, we dump the drinks.
So yes,
okay.
A lot of things happened at the New York Times since last time that we turned on the microphones.
And are still happening. I think it's a little bit, I would like to think that there's a little bit of soul searching going on right now. I would like to think that upper management, which is caved again, starting back with the Tom Cotton op-ed, where first they're saying, including Sulzberger, saying, well, we have an obligation to publish it, and then 2 days later saying, oh well, it was rushed through. It's like they just keep I call it kind of giving into the demands. I'm sure they probably see it differently. Maybe they think that this is the way toward progress. But I'm just going to come back to the two things. You've told us intent doesn't matter, and you have openly lied to your readers about what one of your employees did. And this is a problem.
And it's really evident to people from the outside looking in that the ethics are incredibly situational and opportunistic. Whatever the excuse for not running Tom Cotton's op-ed, and I shouldn't have to say this, but I despise Tom Cotton and be happy to send him out on a slow boat to Mauritius. But like, he is a sitting U.S. senator, and he's making an argument that about a policy that's been used in the past to talk about a present controversy. It's kind of one of the things that happens at newspapers traditionally, is to run op-eds for people like that. The official justification for it could then be seen to have been violated almost immediately, but certainly when they're running propaganda from red Chinese government officials, these things could be used to support violence. Yes, pro-China stuff, like including today from Thomas L. Friedman, who weirdly still has a job. This sort of this will to authority of China. You could judge that on the Tom Cotton standard. And of course, it'd be ludicrous, just as you could judge an interview with Stephen King, where he was talking about, whether it's okay for him to have used the N-word in the past. It's not hard to look on their website, their search engine, and find the word that supposedly you can't even utter in a mention
because the rules
phrase
changed
anymore. But that's it. Like, it's so clear that it's opportunistic. We're going to use this new definition today, right now, as there's a mob outside my door, to make this thing go away. There was a phrase in a piece by David Folkenflik, who works for NPR. Mm-hmm. That's amazing to me. It was from an unnamed staffer, and they said this is right after the resignation of Friday. We've lanced the boils.
We've lanced 2 boils today.
Okay,
I'd like to say one thing about any word. Any word, I don't care what it is. I mean, tomorrow they could decide it's spaghetti, right? Obviously, I'm being a little glib here. The words have historically terrible meanings. When you take a word, any word, and then you treat it like plutonium, right? That's a weapon, right? So a word that the Times, even 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago, could use because it was used in context. Now it can't be, and they want to keep that a weapon. They want to keep it as strong as it possibly can be and pull it out when need be. And I think for anyone that cares about language, that cares about journalism, you have to open things up as opposed to closing them down. The New York Times has to stop narrowing that chute of what we're allowed to talk about.
And as importantly, and this is part of the reason why we're talking to you from a fancy studio that we built. These institutions are all going to get worse for a while now, except for a few conscious ones that decide to go in a different direction. Just like, not necessarily that you have to give up on all of them. Well, give up on a few, but especially those of us who write and talk about this, we just need to create new institutions. I mean, there's a reason why people have a sense of thrill at discovering certain podcasts or certain new people's Substacks, or it could be publication or whatever. Just any zone where humans can talk like normal humans and not just go through these just weird, elaborate charades that don't seem to make a lot of sense. There needs to be, it seems as if there's a march on the institutions right now of journalism. There aren't very many exceptions to the rule. It really sped up last summer in the wake of George Floyd. So many, we've forgotten about them, but there's so many absolutely ridiculous defenestrations that happened in June and July and May. Go look at Poetry Magazine. Go look up the was it the San Francisco Museum?
San Francisco Museum of Art.
Of art or modern art, like insane.
We should post that op-ed we never ran.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, we'll post it for you guys. We won't, but whatever. It's got a lot of people, because we wrote it during that time.
Yeah. complicated to describe, but it was like all over the place, and it's clear there's more of that, not less, in institutions. There are entire editorial desks, like new news divisions, that are about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Although we got a letter at the fifth column the other day saying it should be diversity, inclusion, and equity, so that the acronym is DIE.
Oh my God.
And yeah.
We don't want to die. We want to create new stuff and be able to keep talking to you guys. So keep telling us what you want to talk about.
Yeah, and we will at some point figure out what Nancy's table is going to be.
And we'll also, I know we've had a couple of people asking, like, yeah, we kind of like looking at your mugs over here on YouTube, but we'd really like to be able to stream it just as a podcast. We'll get there. Come on, guys. We're trying here. It's a shoelace production here. So
we're just we're testing out the equipment and figuring out.
Yeah, but we will get that up to you soon, and we will also see you soon. And let's go have another drink.
All right.
Okay.
Late.
Bye, guys.
How much time?